What's up, guys? Welcome to the Kingdom Men Transfer Man Nation podcast, brought to you by our sponsor, the Acquisition CEO. If you're interested in buying or selling a business, hit him up on the link below. Today, I've got a good friend of mine and fellow veteran on the podcast, Rob Hollingsworth. Rob, tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Thanks for having me on. First of all, new to Greenville about 2 years. Grew up in Washington State. I split time between there and Las Vegas. Navy veteran, law enforcement officer in Las Vegas, as well as...
That had to be wild.
Yeah, as Tacoma, Washington was worse. Exited out, became an entrepreneur, moved out here about 2 years ago, like I said, and decided to share my story.
Okay, yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. So first off, let's talk about what it's like being a veteran or even in law enforcement when you get out. So when I was activated, when that activation was up there in Operation Iraqi Freedom, they sent all the active duty guys overseas, and they restaffed the base in Charleston with the reservists, which was me. And so, but when you get done with that, actually, what was hard for me about that is I had to leave a job, right? I had to leave a job. Actually, I was running my own business, doing subcontracting project management. I was doing project management for hire, negotiating insurance claims for like high-end condos and that kind of stuff in Asheville, North Carolina. And I got a call one day, and they're like, "Hey, you got to be in Charleston Friday morning." And I'm like, I thought it was actually a joke. So I hung up the phone. Well, they called back because the government does that. Yeah. And so anyway, went and did my tour and that kind of fun stuff. But then when I got out, there really wasn't any kind of exit program. I ended up taking a job with somebody that I was doing project management for, because I had to let all my business go. So I didn't end up getting back into entrepreneurship, but that's one of your passions, and discovering that. Now I'm back in entrepreneurship by some miraculous other things in life. That's one of the things that you're super passionate about, is helping people who are getting out of active duty or law enforcement discover potential entrepreneurship opportunities, right?
Yeah, my company that I founded is specific to that. It's called Plant Your Flag. But I discovered entrepreneurship as a mistake, or God's will.
Maybe both.
Probably both. My whole life, I just said, my trajectory is military, law enforcement. I wanted to be on SWAT and become a police chief and retire. That's how I grew up. And that's what I saw for myself. Went to school prior to all that to achieve those. And then after 2020 and 21, I said, I don't think I'm going to do this for 20 more years. And so I also couldn't ration just going to get a 9-to-5. So I was either law enforcement or entrepreneurship. And so I did one. Now it's time to do the other.
Two very, very different things.
Yeah, correct.
Not at all in the same bucket. My grandfather was actually in the Army in World War II. And so, big patriot, just a fan of that, super supporter of all those things, and fellow veterans. My college roommate, he was in the Marine Corps, so I was in the Air Force Reserves. He was in the Marine Corps Reserves. We literally had the flags hanging in the living room in our single-wide trailer in Cullowhee. And we used to give each other down the road over just like but it was also in good camaraderie.
Right.
But there certainly is, like, one of the things I've noticed in the veteran community, it doesn't matter. You could be on the side of the road changing a tire. You could be in the gym. You could be having a bad day. There is a sense of, like, mutual respect amongst veterans. I noticed one day in the gym there was a guy, he's a Marine Corps veteran. He was having a hard time just dealing with some things emotionally and mentally. He had lost a dog. And there were some other veterans, man. We just kind of gathered around him and just kind of hung out and talked to him and listened to his story. But have you found that to be true, that, there's a sense of camaraderie amongst veterans for the most part, regardless of like age?
Yes, but conversely, I would like to say that the same is true in law enforcement as well, but I feel it's actually the opposite, especially when you transfer out. So you'll have a couple people that will check in on you, but it seems to be once you're done with it, you're kind of ostracized, which is unfortunate. The military, yes, I would say so more. What's crazy is I always say that law enforcement officers and military, they get stuck in this what I call a black hole, and they feel that that's the only thing that they could do, and they can't get out of it, and they can't expand their brain or their horizons to start thinking outside of the box and thinking about potential businesses and opportunities or other jobs or whatever. They just get stuck in that. and which is obviously that's not a good place to be.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to do with Plant Your Flag.
Yeah, which I think is a huge need. Like, I'm a fan of entrepreneurship. It's where opportunity is created.
Right.
We live in a great free country, and so it's exciting to know that there's opportunity out there that you can go create for yourself almost out of nothing. I laugh about it or think about it all the time. Like, you can start a pressure washing business, you can start a car detailing company, you can start a roofing company, you can go into roofing sales, you can go into car sales. I mean, there's so many things. You can go into real estate. There's so many avenues that are out there as tools to generate revenue. And you're 100% right. People, they get in that identity of I'm this, and then when they get out, they're like, the whole support system is gone.
Just crumbles.
And then they themselves end up in a real bad spot.
Right. Yep.
Because their identity's kind of gone.
And, entrepreneurship, you named it, just spout off a few possibilities there. The possibilities are endless, but in order to get your mind right, law enforcement, military, oftentimes they have unchecked PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Their physical fitness is out of whack, probably because those both work against each other or with
Right.
each other. And so what it does is it hampers their ability to think outside of the box. So that's what we're trying to do, is get people to say, hey, mental health first and foremost, get it in check, and then you get your physical fitness in check, and then you'd be surprised what you could start to think about when a lot of these guys are like, well, I just want to go Home Depot or Lowe's, we spoke about. I'm just going to get a job at Home Depot. It's like, if that's what you want to do, great. If that's what
It's where the end goal is.
But what you're doing, in my opinion, is you're probably replacing one job you hate for another job you hate.
Right.
You're not actually building anything. You're not going to get passionate about something. So what we're trying to do is get people's mindset right so they could start expanding their horizons and thinking, oh, wow, I'm actually passionate about this. Let's turn it into a business.
Yeah, no, and it's so true. Even for other entrepreneurs, a lot of times I find that I coach and mentor. So I coach on mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and financial principles. The same kind of thing. We limit ourselves by our mindset so often. That's where all the stories exist, or inside of our head. That's where it starts. I always say our mind and our mouth determine our destination. And you're so right. We get so ingrained in that structure of the military, or that structure of law enforcement. Then when we're set outside of that box and that structure is gone, I mean, things just kind of start to fall apart inside of our head. I mean, the camaraderie. A lot of times our job becomes our identity, especially
those two roles.
Especially in those two roles in military and law enforcement career. I mean, like, there's flags. I mean, there's vehicles. There's associations. There's coins. There's a uniform. There's so much identity in that when you get outside of that, it's like, what is my identity? And that starts with our thoughts, our words, and our emotions. Our mindset is so huge, like our perspective on everything. I always tell people, like, I use the example of a 6 and a 9. Like, if we had a 6 and a 9 here, we could both be right. So your perspective is powerful. Right. Or even people that are colorblind. Like, I always kind of laugh. I started realizing some of these things about the way that our brain works, because we're not all on the same ride. You know what I mean? Like, if you think about somebody that's colorblind, even sometimes, like, right and wrong or like isn't necessarily the same for everybody. Just because of the 6 and 9 example, or like I think most people that are colorblind, they can't see red and green. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always fascinated by that. Like, our perspective is so powerful about the things that we can and can't see and how we do and don't see them. Right. And they're different from me to you. And so I think one thing too that we all should work on is understanding other people's perspectives, right? Because they may not be the same as ours, and we can't force ours on other people. Just because something makes sense for me or something makes sense for you doesn't mean that it has to make sense for both of us, But that's in sales, right? That's how sales is. When you go to sell somebody a roof, like, your opinion and their opinion are probably not going to be the same. But as the sales guy, you've got to figure out how to bridge the gap.
Yep. Two roofing contractors' opinions probably not going to be the same.
Yeah. And so we've got to learn how to navigate people's perspectives and opinions, not just our own, and understand that people's are different, but even out there in the field, in the entrepreneurship world and business world. I mean, that's what I do for a living. I help people think out of the box and tactically solve problems. And so in order for me to do that, I've got to realize that everybody's perspective can be a little different, but we can all end up at some sort of similar, mutually agreed upon destination. And so that's kind of the point of sales.
Exactly.
Right? You're like, we got to figure this out. But here's the other funny piece about sales. Whoever figures that out is going to get a paycheck, right? And so teaching that to entrepreneurs and veterans and law enforcement guys, and getting them to get that perspective and be like, hey, I always say earn a paycheck instead of get. because you got to earn that thing.
Yep.
You know, and when you become more valuable, which when you learn about your mindset and your perspective and the words that you speak to yourself and those kind of things and your emotions, and you learn emotional intelligence, you become more valuable as a human being. A lot of times in the military, I think they strip that away from us.
It's crazy. When we started this discussion, we said, how opposite and how different, military law enforcement entrepreneurship is, but it's being so vastly different. There's actually a lot of similarities, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
Like in SWAT and law enforcement, you're told to basically find work, fill a gap. Like if you're not doing something, then something's wrong. So find something to do because you can contribute. Well, the same is also true. Just simply thinking about starting a business and looking for opportunities. Like, well, where's a gap that I could fill?
Yeah, that's a great question.
There's a business opportunity probably in that gap. But again, mindset and the ability to find that's the tough part.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I came up with the redneck sales slogan of "You can't catch fish if you're not fishing," because it's like, well, how can you expect for things to change or things to be different if you don't go do anything about it? Which ties to what you were just saying. There's always something that you can be doing. Mm-hmm. And you know that in entrepreneurship and business, that there's always something you can be doing. There's always a phone call you could be making. There's always an appointment you could be setting. There's always some paperwork you could be doing. There's always an email you could be sending. There's always a podcast you could go be on. There's always something to do. Yep. And if there's not, you got to surround yourself with a different group of people who say, hey, man, like, let's think out of the box. What are ways for you to stir up business? Because there's a lot of ways to go fishing. And the more lines you cast, it's a numbers game.
Yep. And then it's tough to stay organized and focused. That's the true kicker. It's like, feeling overwhelmed and then still having time for other things like raising kids, being a good husband.
Absolutely.
So, difficult problems, but it can be done.
I think the focus thing is important. Like a lot of people, one of the things I always think about too in my own personal life and coaching others is it's not about more. It's about what I say is better. Meaning like a lot of people in business, especially, we get that shiny object syndrome and they want to go a mile wide, right? They're a mile wide and an inch deep. And so when you're an inch deep, you don't have good roots, right? And so when things get windy, things get weird. So what I always try to encourage people is, especially up front, there's a season of like discovery. Like, what are the things I want to do, right? It's called the, like, what are those things? Literally, what are they? Write them down and write down 10, 100 things, whatever those are, and then find literally 5 to 10 that you really want to engage with, and then go get deep in those tasks or get better in those tasks. Because there's all kinds of ways to stir a business, whether it's marketing, prospecting, relationship building, door knocking, flyers, email, Facebook, YouTube. There's so many ways. But everybody's not really great at some things, so take the skill set that you've already got a little bit of passionate about and go do those and then get deep. Because when you get deep in things, your roots are planted deep. Then when the wind blows, you're like, man, I'm still good. We still have these core things that we're always going to do. So those are things that I always think about when entrepreneurs want to get that shiny object syndrome. Because it's easy, man.
Squirrel.
Yeah, it's so easy. You're like, ooh, look at that. Ooh, look at that. Ooh, look at that.
I struggled with that when I first became an entrepreneur. I was like, oh, this guy's killing it.
I want to do what he's doing.
And then I'm like, oh, now I'm back. I just wasted 2 months. What am I doing?
It's so easy to do that. And a lot of times that guy's probably killing it because he's been doing it for 5 years, 10 years.
Interesting thing. I was thinking about that on the drive over today. So I was at that event in Florida this week.
Yeah.
My friend, he was talking to a guy that owns a brewery.
Okay.
And so in the last maybe, 3 years, starting to hear this name pop up, this brewery. And so I was off doing something else, and my friend was having this conversation with this guy, and he goes, hey, man, like, how long have you been doing this? And he was expecting to hear, 2 to 3, 5 years tops. And the guy goes, 35 years.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. 35 years.
He goes, I've been in this game for 35 years. And he was like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah.
Finally made it.
Well, he's made it.
Yeah.
We just haven't heard about it.
Sure.
He had another one. He's like, I had another one. I sold that. And then I was bored. And so I started this one. And that was like 6 or 7 years ago.
Sure.
And now it's coming up to where it's like hearing it. It's like, it's a grind sometimes. It takes a lot. So I'm not a brewer. I like beer, but
yeah.
I have no idea about that industry. I have no idea what it takes to make it. But yeah, 35 years this guy's been grinding.
And people
still loves it.
Well, what's funny is, and that's a key point too, is find something that you love and then just go do that. Get real deep in it. That's a good point. Yeah. But the funny thing is people you look at people and they may have nice things or whatever. And you go, man, must be nice, right? Well, you ask the guy, hey, man, how long you been in this business? It's always 10, 15, 20, 35 years. And one of the things I think about for myself is, how committed am I? How committed am I to the business that I want to build, or the industry that I want to be in? Or am I 10 years committed? And a lot of people, they do something for 30 days, 60 days, or 6 months, and they're like, oh, man, it's not working. I can't do it. I'm like, it's not working because you haven't worked it long enough. It takes time. But I'll tell you, I think that's a huge key and a huge killer, is consistency over a given period of time for anything. Whether you want a six-pack or a paycheck, you've got to be consistent at some sort of math problem for a given length of time. And I think people really struggle with that consistency piece.
Especially nowadays, because everything's instant gratification, social media and all that, which if you use effectively is awesome.
It's a huge tool.
That's a whole different conversation, but I was not on social media.
Yeah.
Now I use it for business. But people, they see all they see is the success of somebody. They don't see all the struggles. This guy's got a $100 million business. Well, they don't see the 15 other ones that he failed at.
Yeah.
But he kept pushing through. So it's interesting.
There was somebody I was listening to the other day, and who was it? He said he was on his 9th business, and it's a pretty successful guy. It was Alex Hormozy.
Oh, yeah.
And he was talking about his first 9 businesses failed. 9.
And he still has the fundamentals down.
Yeah.
Maybe he's learned that. I'm sure he has, but yeah.
But it reminded me, like, how committed are you? How committed are you to this thing called entrepreneurship? Because if you have 9 businesses that fail, you got to learn every time. Because it's inevitable that once you get out there and you get started doing something, you're going to fail at some parts of it. And I always see failure as a learning opportunity. But I know people that quit. They don't learn. They just quit. And so that's not the committed piece. They're just not committed because I don't think they have clarity about what they really want life to look like.
Right.
If they knew what was on the other side, like if I asked you, I said, hey, in 35 years, you could have this $1 billion business. Would you work for it for 35 years? You'd be like, well, yeah, right? And the good chances are that if you do whatever you do for 35 years, I hope you're really good at it by that point.
Yeah.
Like you should be that guy. You should have $100 million, $200, $300 million business in 35 years if you stick in an industry for that long. The odds are in your favor. Plus, if you stick with something for 35 years, most other people are going to quit anyway.
Right.
Right?
Die or something.
So I always think like part of the battle of entrepreneurship is staying in the game.
Yep.
You got to outlast them.
You fail when you quit.
You 100% fail when you quit. Nobody wins. I always say you can't even get second place. Like when you quit, you can't get third place. You can't even get last place. You just quit. And I laugh about that because, entrepreneurship's hard. There's times when I'm like, I'm done. I'm going to sell beer out of a stand in Mexico. Like I'm out,
I mean, that does sound kind of fun on the beach.
Sure.
Least, yeah, I get it.
You get a worse sunburn.
Yeah, which I got.
Selling beer on the beach. But it's so true. Like entrepreneurship's tough. But there's a lot of good things that come with entrepreneurship. First off, I think there's a lot of self-worth that you build in entrepreneurship because it literally is up to you to get up and get out of bed every day and go show up to do what God laid on your heart to do or gave you the talents to do. And that's tough.
Yep. Yeah. And I was telling you earlier about a guy I met this week.
Yeah.
And he, obviously his talent inherently was drawing.
Yeah. Crazy.
Let's
talk about that story a little bit.
Yeah. So when I was in Florida, I met a guy. I actually saw him in Texas 2 weeks ago. I briefly met him. I didn't have a chance to talk. Let's go back to networking, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Super important piece.
Have an event. I meet him there. There's a lot of people at this event. Next morning, we happened to be staying at the hotel. I had a late flight out of Florida. I see him in the lobby. He goes, "What time's your flight leave?" And I said, "It's like 7 o'clock. It's like 9 a.m. I'm like, "What are you doing today?" He goes, "Nothing." So I sat in the hotel lobby. We ate and hung out by the pool all day and just talked about business. And
huge wisdom, though.
Oh, and so he's a retired cop, 22 years. Make a long story short, he runs for a police chief position. He gets second place. The police chief hates him. And day one, he goes, "You need to find a new job." So he gets down on his luck, gets depressed, blah, blah, blah. Didn't sit well with him. And he's like, in this time, this went on for a few months. Finances are drawing up. They don't make a lot of money down there. his wife goes, "Hey, we got property tax is our due," and he goes, "I'll take care of it." So he's like at his wit's end. He has no idea what to do. So
Sometimes that's a good place to be.
it can be. I mean, in this case, yeah.
Right.
There's definitely worse places to be. So he prays to God. He says, "I don't know what you want me to do." And he's passed up a few jobs. I think I mentioned that as chief, but it just didn't sit well. And he's like,
I'm out.
He's like, I'm not going to do that. And so praise God. He goes, "Give me a sign. I give up. I'm all yours. Like, what do I do?" So like a day or two later, mind you, he likes to draw. So he draws a police like helmet design or whatever, and I guess he puts it up on this marketplace called like Teespring. Throws it up there, and he had a kid's birthday party to go to, so 3-4 hours go by, and he comes back and he sold 250 shirts.
That's a lot of shirts.
With zero marketing.
To come out of the gate.
Zero marketing. This is like 2 days after his prayer, and he goes, "Oh," so he gets the property tax money and a little bit more.
Yeah.
Gives it to his wife. She's just like, "Oh, okay." Well, he leaves the design, doesn't touch it for 3 months, and he sold $300,000 worth of shirts.
That's crazy.
All profit.
So God's always good. I always say that.
And he goes, "Well, I guess that's my sign, so this is what I'm going to do." So he retires from law enforcement, funds a company. He took that money, he opened up his whole screen printing shop, so he's in business, none of his own money, and operational within 3 months.
Isn't that wild?
Hires a bunch of people, and now he donates over $2.5 million to law enforcement officers. And this is, I think the company's about 6 or 7 years old.
That's so awesome.
Very well known. I won't name it, but
yeah.
You just never know. It's crazy.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
So first off, God's always so good. A lot of times, we've got to figure out sometimes I think we have to be desperate to figure out what it is God really wants us to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're too comfortable almost every other time. Like if somebody came to him previously and was like, "Hey, I want you to start a T-shirt company," he'd be like, no.
Especially a cop. He'd be like, "No."
He'd be like, I'm qualified to be a police chief. Like, what do you? You're the worst person to give me advice. So sometimes we've got to be in that place to where we can listen. Because I think listening is a huge part of entrepreneurship and a huge part of being a man of faith and even being a husband and father, which we were talking about a little bit earlier too. Like another challenge of entrepreneurship is, in being a good man, I think, is making those things important. Being a good husband. One of the things I'm huge on that. That's one of my main passions is teaching entrepreneurs how to be powerfully present husbands and fathers. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, they miss that. They get hung up in the sales. They get distracted by all the things. The business tasks. They're terrible at feeling their feelings. I've been there too.
Yep, me too. Providing, just providing.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. And then still sitting down and reading that book when the kid's like, "Hey, Dad, I want to read a book." You're like, I gotta go make money. And it's like, well, do I really?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer's kind of sort of, but at the end of the day, when you and I are laying on our deathbed, nobody's gonna care that we sold more whatevers. But our kids will say, they'll be like, "My dad made time for me." And I always think about that, like, because I lost both my parents at a young age. And so I've kind of been down that road about, like, that story's been written, for them, and it's done. So when my story is written, what is my daughter going to say about me, or what does my daughter tell her friends about me? And it carries a lot of weight in my life these days because it's super important. Like, I want to be her hero.
Right.
It's kind of dad I want to be.
Especially girls.
Yeah. Our daughters will date us and our sons will become us.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a Facebook post, it might have been over the weekend or last week, but asking like, what was it? What are your children learning by the way you treat your spouse?
Yeah, I saw that.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a two-way street. By, how does the wife treat the husband? How does the husband treat the wife? And it's like, for me, my daughter should see me dating my wife. She should see me compassionate. She should see me. I think about it the way that God loves us, with grace, love, and mercy. Right. I don't need to be running around the house all chaotic. I don't need to be running around the house yelling, raising my voice, and acting all crazy, because that's not what I want to teach my daughter love looks like.
Yeah, you don't want a man acting like that. Or
exactly. I have to go get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have to teach the man less. That's why I got to stay in the gym, But it's true. And so being a husband and being a father is a tough part of entrepreneurship. And that's one of my big passions about coaching people in entrepreneurship is the father and the husband piece. Because I think a lot of people overlook it. They want to sell more, generate revenue, have this, have that. And it kind of ties back to what I was saying in the beginning about more. Like I don't care about more. Like I want to be better. I want to be a better husband, I want to be a better service to people in the community. I want to be a better father. I want to be a better entrepreneur. And I think all those things are really what makes us valuable instead of just being the most volume producing sales guy.
Yeah.
You know,
I think people, when they listen to stuff like this, and I was probably one of them, especially cops, because they're like, well, that's nonsense.
right.
It doesn't take a whole lot of time to make these changes.
Right.
It just takes an effort and a strategic and coaching, or you just like letting go and just being like, all right. 'Cause I mean, I only left law enforcement 2 years ago, and I can't even envision going back.
Right.
If I was actually talking to my friend who's military, right? I go, you ever think about going back? He goes, yeah, kind of. And he's an entrepreneur now. And he goes, honestly, if I went back, I think I would last 2 weeks. I'm like, ugh, like this is just not me anymore.
No.
And I go, yep, 100%.
It's a fun season. I enjoyed the camaraderie of it and the discipline of it.
Chapter on to the next one.
Right. But I couldn't go back. Like I even think about going to like a normal job. There's no way. I would be a terrible employee. You know what I mean? It'd be terrible.
Hey, I have this complaint. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Don't care.
Wouldn't work. But no, that'd be funny. So one of the original conversations we had on a podcast that I did via Zoom when I was doing them on Zoom was Home Depot versus Lowe's. And I don't even know how we got off on that sidebar.
You did something and I commented. I said Home Depot's better or something
on Facebook or something like that. And then I was like, man, we got to really talk about this. This is a very serious problem in the United States, whether you're a Home Depot guy or a Lowe's guy. And, you know, I'd actually asked a question. I think I put up a poll either on my story about that time or made a Facebook post, and somebody picked Ace Hardware. I was like, Ace Hardware doesn't count. Ace Hardware is great, but they're like bougie.
For a grill or something.
Yeah, they're bougie. You can't go buy plywood and like materials at Ace Hardware. Plus, if you like down the Outer Banks, there's a few Ace Hardwares in there nearby. And so if I need some screws or a light bulb or whatever, a few small stuff, I'll go in there. They're 14 times more expensive inside of that store than anywhere else. And Dollar General is not an option either. That is not a hardware store. You've got to be either in the Home Depot court or the Lowe's court. And so hopefully they don't reach out to us and cancel our podcast for this. But Home Depot, that's Ryobi.
Yeah, I think. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's Ryobi. And then Lowe's is Cobalt.
Yeah.
And then on the Home Depot mechanics tools, it's Husky. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, they got Husky there.
So I just like Lowe's. Lowe's has always been, they had veterans parking first, I think.
Well, Home Depot has it, so.
They do now, but they didn't before, I don't think. And then I just know my way around Lowe's. Like in Hendersonville, where we first started out, Lowe's was just easier. And actually, there wasn't even a Home Depot around when I was a kid first. They built the Home Depot after they built Lowe's.
So I'm the same way with Home Depot. I know my way around wherever I go. I'm like, it's either flipped or I could tell you where something is but by the layout right when I walk in. I'm like, oh, it's going to be over here or over here. Lowe's is a free-for-all.
That's so funny.
I cannot, and their return policy absolutely sucks.
At Lowe's?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had to return a whole lot. I've had good look out of swapping tools. Like they have the lifetime warranty on Cobalt, stuff like that. I still have a battery pack that I still need to take back, even since last time we talked, that I have not taken back to Lowe's. It rides around in my truck, and it's in there because I need to think about it, but it's in the passenger side floorboard. Yeah. And so I never think about it when I go to Lowe's. And I was in Lowe's Saturday.
I think about that conversation often, including 2 weeks ago. We had a job going in, full roof replacement, and I go, oh, because ABC Supply is who I use for a supplier. They didn't have chimney flashing. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, well, dang, where else can I go? I'm like, I'll try Home Depot because it said they had some. I go in there, none. I'm like, guess I got to go to Lowe's. Lowe's had like 15 boxes of them. I'm like, all right, there's a point.
Lowe's gets a win. We ought to start making a national scorecard. We'll make a Facebook group. Yeah, we'll make a spreadsheet. Yeah. Everybody loves spreadsheets. I'm a spreadsheet nut. It's funny because my wife will ask me something. I'll be like, let me check the spreadsheet. Even this podcast, the guests, people's names and dates they're all on a spreadsheet. Everything exists on a spreadsheet. So anyway, I've had good luck out of Lowe's. I like Home Depot. I will say that the Home Depot at the Outer Banks is closer than the Lowe's. And so I built an outdoor shower, I don't know, last year in the fall. And so I had to go to Home Depot, and the lumber was better. I'll say the lumber was better. It was straighter.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, that's actually how this whole thing started, was a Facebook post about what is better, Home Depot or Lowe's.
Networking. That's what I tell cops and
Facebook
military
is a
guys.
social media is a huge networking opportunity and engaging with people on social media. Like I have people who I'm friends with or followers or whatever, and they'll say something to me and I'm like, you didn't even like the post, but I know they're watching because they'll say something to you.
Yeah.
But social media is a huge, powerful tool. A couple of years ago, Gary Vee and then Brad Lee, they were talking about how making 3 reels a day for 3 years in a row will make you a millionaire in your business.
Interesting.
And so social media is just a powerhouse tool for connecting and relationship building, and then building your personal brand too, right? Like, who are you? What are you about? I wear Facebook out for that exact reason, and I'm super passionate about what I do. I believe there's a big problem in the entrepreneurial space about people being out of alignment with who God made them to be, just mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And then people have a great skill set a lot of times, but they don't have a lot of good business management skills.
Yep.
And so, you can be a great solopreneur, but if you want to build something and make more time for yourself, it takes project management skills, the communication, the scheduling, budgeting, cash flow analysis, balance sheet, all those kind of things. And so I just love it. I love helping entrepreneurs win. I love to say we like to help entrepreneurs win faster.
Yeah.
Like, you cut out all the BS.
It's cheaper.
Yeah. It's cheaper to win faster too. Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, you don't have to take the hard road.
Yeah.
Somebody, I don't remember who it was. They said the quickest way to get from point A to point B without taking the hard road is to hire somebody that's done it, right? You go find somebody else in whatever business you're in. Same thing to people that listen or watch this. Ask us, ask me, ask him, ask somebody. Whatever business you're in, go find somebody. That's what I did when I was in real estate. I found some of the top producing brokers in the area, and I was like, I want to have coffee.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to know, what do you do? How do you do it?
Spend $6 on them to take them to coffee.
This is the greatest investment you could ever make.
Yeah.
You just had some cool experiences this weekend by just hanging out with the people in the right space, being present.
You know how I got there?
How'd you get there?
So TAPS class in the military, when you get out, transition out, they give you 1 free year of LinkedIn.
Oh, wow.
So I created it in the military. I got hired as a cop immediately, so I didn't touch it because they tell you, hey, stay off social media, blah, blah, blah. So I had like fake accounts or whatever. Transition, 7 years later, I make a video, it went viral, and some guy messaged me and says, hey, so-and-so wants to talk to you. I go, oh, I know who that is. Sure, give him my number. And when he Googled me, that was the only thing that popped up was my LinkedIn. So I got an email. That guy that messaged me, I've met him 2-3 times now. He does a lot of behind the scenes, what's the term? Management and stuff for people. He's like a manager for recording artists and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I've gone to 4 or 5 events now over the last couple of years. And so it culminated with the one I went to this week in Florida.
Yeah.
And it's like our own little crew now. We live everywhere, but we all have this common theme. And it was simply because I made that LinkedIn profile 7-8 years ago. Actually, longer than that now. And it's still paying for itself. And it was free.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy.
Well, that's a whole other thing we were talking about in the beginning about going fishing, right? It's just an avenue. Like, get out there, make the post, ask the question, hit people up. I always tell people, make the phone calls, build the relationships. I was doing cold calling before we got here today. I was calling old real estate leads. Just say, hey, how's it going? We're going into spring. What's happening? And here's the thing about that is, if you ever want to reach out to somebody, just have a conversation with them. They're just another person.
No strings attached. Just say, hey.
Just, hey, what's up? How's it going? I always ask people, how's the weather? Like, you can talk to people. Everybody will talk to you about the weather. Or pets.
Yeah.
You got a dog. Like, everybody likes talking about their dog.
I'll have people message me online, and they'll be local to Greenville, and I'll say, hey, you want to meet for coffee?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
When's good for you? Oh, next Wednesday. Cool, I'll meet them. I got it, man. $6 coffee, maybe a scone, and maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it doesn't, or maybe in 2-3 years down the road, they're going to say, hey, bro.
Hey, you remember that coffee you bought me? Hey, I like that conversation we had.
It's simple. It's really, if you just I did a post a couple weeks ago. Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, don't overcomplicate it. It's actually not that complicated.
Take a picture of yourself on a roof and say,
and
hey,
post it.
There you go.
Yeah.
And people will be like, hey, I need a roof.
Exactly. What it is you're staying top of mind with what you do.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not complicated. entrepreneurship, it's like everything else in life. It's really a math problem. But then it's a commitment and a consistency problem.
Yep.
And those are a byproduct of your clarity, right? Those are the 3 C's. So if you have clarity and what you want life to look like and what you want out of life, you will be consistently committed to it. And you're in it because you have clarity about what you want. People that waver in their clarity, they ain't consistent and they definitely ain't committed. But again, that whole concept really isn't complicated. It's pretty simple. It's very basic.
Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff, man. Well, one of the things I always like to wrap up with is I like to ask for a tip. If you could give somebody a tip, whether it's personal or in business or whatever it may be, if you think you got one thing that somebody's ever said to you or that you've come across, in your adventures of life, what would that one thing be to say, hey, take this piece of wisdom, take this thought process, whatever it may be, take this sales process about being a husband, I don't care what it is. What's something that you could share with somebody and they'd go, you know what, that made a difference in my life?
Just be honest with yourself. I think we all have our internal issues. Some of us are better at sharing them or admitting them than others. I had some. I struggled with it, PTSD related from military and law enforcement stuff. And it just held me back, turned me into not the person I was capable of being. And it wasn't until I said, okay, I'm gonna go out and face this, whatever's. That's when my business and family and everything just started to come back to, now I feel like me again versus, what I was, the fog in the military and law enforcement. So, yeah. But I think that applies to everybody's going to have some issue they're dealing with. So just be honest with yourself. And if you need to address it, then go address it. Otherwise, it's just going to handcuff you.
That's so good. That's so good. And it's so true. We've got to I think change starts with honesty, but it's hard because that means that we got to change.
Yep.
Rob, thanks for being on the Kingdom Men Transfer Man Nation podcast today. We appreciate it. We want to give a shout out and an appreciation to our sponsor, the Acquisition CEO. Again, you can hit him up in the link. If you're curious about buying or selling a business, let us know. And I always like to say, let's go do some winning.
That's right.